I'm here in the Ornellaia tasting room with Axel Hines, and we are going to have an opportunity to talk about and to taste everything from their entry-level wine up to the Ornellaia itself and the Ornellaia sort of second wine, the Serre Nuove as well. But we have here in our glass the 2009 Le Volte, which is their entry-level wine. And why don't you tell us a little bit about this, Axel, in terms of the blend and the personality of this wine in general?
First of all, it's a wine that has almost been there ever since Ornellaia was founded. The first vintage of Ornellaia had been the 1985, and the first vintage of Le Volte was 1991, so very early in the history of the estate. Le Volte was created as a wine that would be complementary to Ornellaia, the serious, age-worthy wine. We wanted to have also something to propose that would be a little bit easier to understand, more approachable and more affordable.
Let's do some tasting of this and cheers. See how this is turned out. I noticed that the nose on this really very much reflects the Merlot percentage in here. It has a very kind of a smooth, round nature to it, but still there's a lot of liveliness underneath.
It's true that in 2009, it's both a reflection, I think, of the Merlot, which is it's true, it's about 50% of the blend. But you know, Le Volte has always been a wine in which the two major flavors were Sangiovese and Merlot. On the other hand, it's also reflecting very much the 2009 vintage, which was a sunny vintage, a very warm vintage, and has produced these very forward, opulent, smooth, and very friendly wines that are very enjoyable. Even as young.
Well, this has very lively, dark fruit to it. There's some spice coming in here that you can taste on the palate as well. This is a delicious wine. It's very juicy, very food friendly. You can tell right up front. Very enjoyable, and I'm sure a great expression of your entry-level wine.
It is. You know, it still is a wine that is made by Ornellaia, so we want to make the best possible wine in a less ambitious style. So that's what we try to do with Le Volte, and I hope that people enjoy it for what it is.
Well, excellent effort, excellent expression. We just finished the tasting here in the tasting room of Ornellaia with Axel Hines of the Serre Nuove 2009, the Ornellaia 08, and the 03. Fascinating tasting. Let's talk about the Serre Nuove first, which is considered the Ornellaia second wine. Is that right?
Definitely, definitely so. When Le Serre Nuove was created in 1997, the idea of a second wine was not something very developed in Tuscany. Now, obviously, we know that second wines have been for a long time popular in Bordeaux, especially where every big estate today is producing a second wine. But when we started doing this, it was not really a concept that the Tuscans were very familiar with, because you rather would have the regular bottling and then the Reserva bottling that would correspond to a top wine which would produce only in exceptional years. The idea of a second wine is to produce, first of all, a top bottling every year, which is Ornellaia, and then make a second leg for the wines that are not quite living up to the level you would expect for Ornellaia. So we started doing this in '97 when we started a second series of planting in the Bellaria vineyard. So we had already adult vines that are already producing Ornellaia in those days, and younger vineyards that were coming into production. And we continue to produce it, and it's become now a very important wine for us because it guarantees the quality level of Ornellaia, obviously, but it's also a wine that is very rapidly growing in production. We're producing today more bottles of Le Serre Nuove than we produce actually of Ornellaia, so it's an important wine.
Well, and I have here, you know, it's about 50% Merlot in this blend.
Yes, usually, but Merlot tends to be the dominating grape variety that can range from 40 to 60% in the blend. Okay. First of all, because we've got a lot of young vine Merlot still in the estate, but also because obviously a Merlot in its slightly gentler, rounder style is favourable to producing a wine that is a little bit more approachable compared to a wine that will be dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon.
Wonderful flavors here, very dark, nice rich fruits, some kind of grilled herbs and smoke. And I don't think people should mistake this as being kind of an entry-level, sort of shy, timid wine, because there are some vintages here when this wine has tremendous expression, very delicious, and again, it's a wine that has some aging potential behind it too.
Definitely has. It is enjoyable young, but it's true that it's definitely a wine that will improve if cellared, and it has the potential at least 8 to 10 years where it continues to grow and develop more complexity.
Moving over to the big brother, as you call it, the Ornellaia 08, that certainly is a wine that's characterized by much deeper fruits and a much deeper structure, but still not one of these over-the-top structures, just a very enjoyable but clearly very well-structured wine.
Yes. What is important for us is not just to make a difference in terms of size, which is sometimes a little trap. Thinking that the better wine is necessarily the more concentrated, the bigger, the wine that has more power. Definitely it has, because we use the best lots of the oldest lines for Ornellaia. So there is definitely more density, more intensity of fruit, but I think there's also a level of elegance that probably the second wine doesn't have to that high extent. So it's at the same time richer but more balanced. So we want to see something that is intense, ripe and rich, because that's the expression of a sunny growing area, but at the same time have a wine that has clear focus and a lot of elegance and complexity too.
Well, it'll be fun to lay this down for a while and come back to it every so often and just see how this evolves. And finally, we have the 03, which I think is a fascinating vintage. You and I were speaking about some of the vintages that don't necessarily gain the high profile of some of those sort of stellar vintages per se, that kind of fly under the radar screen, but can be absolutely wonderful, magnificent wines, really classic wines, and perhaps because they didn't gain quite as much stature, may actually be a little bit more affordable, going forward.
Definitely, the idea was to present, well, a young vintage of Ornellaia, which is 2008, and one that has already started its evolution in bottle, to see how the wine changes, because I think it changes, loses a little bit of its baby fat, a little bit of its sort of almost fruit bomb character it can have sometimes as a young wine, to something much more complex and multi-layered. But it was always nice to show that that does not only happen in the stellar vintages, that actually happens also in the normally good vintages. 2003 was not necessarily considered as one of the best vintages in this area, but still it's a wine that has had a beautiful evolution, and it's starting to be really enjoyable to drink and delivering a lot of complexity and pleasure.
And I think that the word complexity and sort of multi-dimensional is really where it's at, because you and I were discussing that while there is deep fruit there, it seems to be sitting deeply underneath, at least on the nose to start with, and coming out, you end up with sort of grilled or stewed meat flavor, aromas, and you really have to kind of go to the palate to sort of taste that deeper fruit. It just shows you how, with aging, these wines can evolve and change in complexity. So what you want to do is you want to pick up a case of some of these wines, and then perhaps lay it down for a few years, and then every so often pick one out, try it, and then see how that wine evolves. Meanwhile, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Cheers to you. Good luck with the harvest.